World stock markets plummeted on Monday, the worst drop since the World Trade Center attack in 2001. The global economic meltdown is fueled by worries of a possible worldwide recession, spurred by weaknesses in the U.S. economy. In what some are calling a panic move, the U.S. Federal Reserve slashed interest rates by 3/4 of a point, the largest rate cut since 1982. It may have temporarily stopped the bleeding, but questions still remain about an economy that, as President Bush put it, is facing some challenges. Here with us today is Leo Panitch, Professor of Political Economy at York University in Toronto. Leo, some people are suggesting that this is really just a question of the subprime mortgage debacle, a little more regulation on that front, we wouldn't be in this situation. But if you go back to an article as far back as December 2004 on Fox News, no less, the headline is U.S. consumer credit card debt may crash the economy. Are we looking at a temporary phenomenon, or are we looking at something more fundamental connected with the issue of consumer debt?
Well, I think it is more fundamental connected with consumer debt, and that itself relates to a 30-year period in which American workers suffered an inability to increase their standard of living through wages.
Why was that?
The breaking of the American labor movement back in the early 1980s. You'll remember the very famous strike by the air traffic controllers that Reagan undertook, was combined with, at that point, very, very high interest rates to beat inflation out of the economy. And the American economy has been kept going.
But back up one step. Some of our viewers may not remember the story with Reagan. Just really quickly, what was the significance of that air traffic controllers?
Well, he stood up to a strike by the air traffic controllers and decertified the union. That symbolized, alongside other stuff that was going on, the bailout of the Chrysler Motor Company on the condition that the United Auto Workers in the United States reopen their contracts and give concessions to the companies, et cetera. And there's been a general deunionization in the United States.
Connected with labor changes in labor legislation?
Very much so, and connected with changes in the role that the Labor Board has played in terms of union certification and so on. And it's generally accepted. This isn't only true of the United States. The strength, the organized strength of workers to secure collective bargaining gains has been broken over the last 30 years. It's part of the backbone of the general decline of the left everywhere.
So how does this connect
in those
with economic
conditions,
growth?
workers have, in the United States, in the richer capitalist countries generally, maintained their standards of living. But they maintain their standards of living by working longer hours, by their whole family working, and by, above all, living on credit. What we see with the current mortgage crisis and with the credit card difficulties that preceded it is that especially lower income workers and especially black workers, African American workers in the United States, which have always been the Achilles heel of being able to integrate American workers into the U.S. society, are now facing the difficulty of maintaining their standard of living by accessing credit. And this came out in the attempt by the mortgage shysters to extend subprime mortgage loans to African American communities. That's the deeper element of the crisis. That's not to say that also the general deregulation process, the freedom that governments have allocated the banks generally, financial capital generally, to move capital where they would, to engage in very, very risky investments, et cetera, has not been part of this process. So one can't just speak of the subprime thing as you might have regulated this. It's in general part of an active role by governments to disempower working people and to empower those places where people who have money or have easy access to borrowing money to speculate with money are located in the society.
In terms of the growth of consumer debt, this is from the article from 2004, and the situation has gotten worse since then. They refer to a New York Times study of how the use of credit has taken off dramatically in the United States since 1990. It says while the number of people holding credit cards grew at 75%, from 82 million in 1990 to 144 million in 2003, The amount they charged during that period grew by a much larger percentage, approximately 350%, from $338 billion to $1.5 trillion. The article goes on and says that would mean that a person who depended on a salary as the only source of income would have had to see a $35,000 salary in 1990 grow to $122,500 in 2003 to keep up with the extra credit load. Possible, but not very likely.
Impossible.
Impossible.
Impossible given the relations of forces in the United States, or actually anywhere in the world. Impossible. So the big question is whether the kind of sustained dynamism of the American economy, which is at the center of the global capitalist economy, which really has not had a severe recession since the early 90s, and even that one was a relatively brief one. Before that it was the early 80s, whether it can sustain itself.